Welcome into another episode of That Betting Podcast with Predictology. My name is Kris. I am the MLS card guy, and today I am joined by my co-host. His name is John. He's the guru of all things Predictology. How are you today, Johnny?
Hey, Kris. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. That's the first time you called me Johnny. That's a new one.
We'll break out everything.
Great to be back after a 3-week sabbatical. So really looking forward to getting into it and getting back to normal routines.
Yeah, we had a whole bunch of stuff going on. We were in London for a little while, which that was a whole fiasco, whole story. You've got on stream there, your Soros shirt is going. So definitely check us out on YouTube. Make sure you can see John's Soros shirt and the subtle football index shirt in the background. Yeah, well, I wasn't supposed to say that, but I said it anyway. So we're going to go ahead and get into the show. We are going to go pretty much mostly MLS for this one. We have a couple thoughts on a couple games in the EPL. But it'll be mostly MLS. We'll kind of link in the bottom in the show notes when we start talking about the EPL. So if you do want to see that, we will let you know what time to go to. But we will be talking about that more next week as we get a little bit more information. Next week we'll have 5 games in the books, so we'll have a nice little sample size that we can start to kind of digest how these teams are beginning to look. So let's go ahead and hop into our first MLS game of the week. And it's a big one. It's a doozy. It's the heavyweight fight in the Western Conference. Austin versus LAFC. Austin fans have been waiting for this for a long, long time. This is the biggest game in their history. The tickets are all sold out. The tickets are astronomically expensive. They are currently underdogs, 2.74 at home. And LAFC comes in at 2.28 on the road. That's the highest number we've seen on LAFC in a long time. But Austin still as a home underdog. You can kind of go disrespect on both sides. Where do you think here, John?
Yeah, I think it's definitely the game of the week for 100%. Whether it's the best betting match of the week is another question. But yeah, look, LAFC are coming off that defeat in Jose, which, as I correctly called last week, it was a much changed LAFC side, and I'm pretty sure we'll see a number of the regular starters back in the lineup. So I wouldn't read too much into that defeat. Yeah, it's an interesting one. You know, LAFC are 9 points clear in the Western Conference. Austin sits second, 6 points ahead of Dallas in third, which we'll come on to later, which is quite surprising using Dallas in third place. Prior to the defeat to San Jose last week, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the last defeat LAFC suffered was in fact against Austin back in May. Right at the beginning.
I did not look that up. Yeah, that would be pretty crazy, though.
Look, I think it's an interesting one. Austin's last 3 home games have read 4-3, 3-3, and 3-4. So we could be in for an interesting afternoon. And also, I think the one stat that I found quite interesting here was that this actually pits the 2 best performing second half teams in the league this season. Between them, they've got 35 wins in the second half. So whoever wins that second half battle is probably going to be the tide that comes out on top. What do you think, Kris?
That's a great stat about the second half because no matter what happens in the first half, both teams are kind of going to feel confident going into halftime and coming out of it. But yeah, you nailed it. My big stat on this game was 20 goals in the last 3 games for Austin at Austin, 10-4, 10 against. They're the second team in MLS history to score and concede at least 3 goals in 3 straight home matches. The Union did so back in 2014. And I think this follows maybe not quite that much, not a 3-3, but I could see like 3-1. I could see 3-2. I could see a 2-1. I think there are goals in this game just because Driussi is on an absolute tear. He's probably the MLS MVP. He's kind of running away with it, to be honest with you. And LAFC are the deepest team we've ever seen. So, I mean, it's going to be a fascinating battle, and I think a lot of people are probably looking at this as like a Western Conference final preview. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it would be in LA instead of in Austin, unless something crazy happens. But yeah, this will be a really, really good, fun game Friday night. So I will actually get to watch it, which is great. And the last stat that I have on this one, visiting side has won 3 of the 4 meetings between these two teams. LAFC is the only team to win twice in Austin. They had a 2-0 win last July and a 2-1 win last September. So they're trying to go 3 wins before anybody else even gets to 2 wins there. It will be a clash of titans for sure.
Yeah, I think certainly from a viewer perspective, I think the really encouraging thing for this game is the fact that it's kind of a what's the word I'm looking for? Not a free hit, but with LAFC so clear at the top of the conference and Austin sitting pretty comfortably in second, there isn't that sort of worry that if one side loses that they might be giving up important positions in the table. That's not to say that either team doesn't want to win. I think they absolutely will want to win this game, but we could see two teams going really toe to toe with each other rather than being defensive and trying to stand off and nick a game. I think these two teams could really want to land a morale boosting punch ahead of the playoffs, but also really test themselves against each of these two sides. The market that appeals best to me, particularly when we look at that second half stat, is both teams to score in the second half is priced at 2.5, which I think will give us an excellent run for our money in this game.
I think that's a pretty decent shout there. And also you're talking about both teams wanting to win this game. It's important to note LAFC are trying to set the record for the most amount of points in MLS history. They are right on the pace. They're 1 point ahead of where New England was through 26 games last year. And Austin, to their credit, are still trying to catch LAFC. They're 9 points back, but if you win this game, you're 6 points back, and all of a sudden, you're starting to feel a little bit like maybe something could happen. Yeah. So it's really a no-lose situation for either side. So I think you're 100% on the money there. I think both teams will go for it. I think we'll see a fast, open game as normal Austin games are. When we actually get down into the numbers, the thing that kind of scares me a little bit, both of these teams can score. We know both of these teams can score. I don't know if Austin can really hold up defensively, though. That's the thing that scares me the most. Austin, like we've kind of put a light on here, they've given up a ton of goals at home in the last 3 games, and LAFC are easily the best team that's going to walk in there. So I'm a little. I've been on the Austin hype train all year long, right? Like I've been cashing some nice underdogs for them on the road, but I think I'm getting off for this one. I think I'm going LAFC just to flat out win this game and continue their march to being the best team in history.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't put anyone off. I've been pick backing LAFC, and if I had to pick a team out of the two, it would be LAFC. I mean, any team that concedes 10 goals at home in 3 games, you've got to have some question marks around. It's great outscoring teams and going, you scored 3, I'll score 4, but it is a big concern if your defense ships that number of goals. I would prefer focusing on the goals in this market, and that's why I like that second half play. But if this game's level at the break, I would be edging towards LAFC for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. And it's going to be, even if you don't even want to put a bet on it, it'll be a really fun one to watch for sure.
It's not going to be dull.
It should be very entertaining. Yeah, very, very entertaining, very open games, hopefully. So let's transition from a game that is a no-lose situation to a game that might just be a no-win situation. We have 2 teams desperate for 3 points. Both of these 2 teams are known for making their runs in mid-August, late August, and just going on a run, getting into the playoffs, and then killing people once they get into the playoffs. This is the Cascadia Cup between Portland and Seattle, a very away or visitor-dominated rivalry between these two. I believe 8 wins from the road team in the last 10 games between these two. And obviously Portland won in Seattle earlier this season. Both of these teams are currently outside of the playoff line. Both are on 33 points. The playoff line right now is at 34 points. Portland have actually played 1 extra game over Seattle as well. So going into this game here, Seattle is basically even with Portland on the line. 2.53 for Portland, 2.52 for Seattle. It's about as even as you can possibly get. These 2 teams are both kind of in the same, general area. Where are we leaning with this one here?
From a personal perspective, I have no idea who's going to win this game. But these are 2 sides that will both quickly agree that they've massively underperformed this season, but they're also 2 legacy teams that you never want to rule out. I think for me, my interest in this game is with Seattle from an observational perspective, because I think they're 2 or 3 points out of the playoffs, which is with 6 or 7 games to go, is certainly not insurmountable. 1 point, sorry.
1 point. Mm-hmm.
But as we've talked offline at length in the past, Chris, Seattle's a team you don't want to rule out when it comes to MLS Cup. And we were looking at the odds on that at the moment, and they're sitting something like 17th in the list at 33-1, which I think is just massive. So if Seattle can squeak into the playoffs, we know they've got the parts and the potential in the team, particularly with Rui Diaz back and such like. So I'd be watching this one with a view of what's going to happen in MLS Cup rather than trying to pick a winner in this game. I was trying to come up with an analogy, and I don't know if this is the perfect one, but I'm looking at Seattle as sort of a Real Madrid in the Champions League type of team, where even if they're not performing in the league, once it gets to the business end of the tournament, you can't rule them out, even if they're doing atrociously in every other game. I'm not sure that's the best analogy, but the only other thing I'd say is that Portland have, in 74% of their games this season, both teams have scored. So, we could be looking at a 1-1, 2-1, 1-2 kind of outcome here. I would probably side with Seattle just about, but as I say, I'm more interested in what this means for the longer term for both sides than the actual game on the day.
So I think aside from a run in the middle of the summer, Portland has really not clicked all year long. Mm. And you kind of felt like they would make a run kind of towards the end of the season, but they just have never really gotten there. Seattle, and I watched the Seattle LA Galaxy game last week. Seattle completely dominated that game. They were all over LA Galaxy. Ended up a 3-3 draw because the Galaxy got essentially 2 goals that they shouldn't have gotten. But Seattle were, and to their credit, they created chances, which was the thing that I have been waiting for them to do. Rui Diaz finally back in the lineup. They scored 3 goals. That's what I needed to see. Now, the thing that concerns me about Seattle is Christian Roldan. Christian Roldan goes down. He's going to have surgery. They said he's out about 4 weeks, which would put him back right around playoff time. It could be a good thing, kind of, because the Roldan injury will force Rusnak higher up the pitch, which I think is much more natural for him. And I think putting in another defensive midfielder could actually be a good thing for the Sounders. They switched to a back 3 as well during that LA Galaxy game, so hopefully they stay with that, because it just opened everything up and led to a lot more free-flowing chances. Could be a good thing, but let's not underestimate Christian Roldan. Christian Roldan has played more minutes in MLS than any other player for the last 3-4 years. He plays every single match, and he plays 90 minutes every single match. How are they going to look without Christian Roldan is a big, big question mark. But that being said, I still kind of like the Sounders. I like where they are compared to Portland. And like I said, this game has been dominated by the road team. Only 1 win and 1 draw in the last 10 for the road team in this fixture since the beginning of 2019. And the last stat I'll give you about this game, Seattle or Portland has been in the MLS Cup every year since 2014. One of the two has won the Western Conference every year since 2014. This doesn't look like the year that's going to continue. This looks like it's going to be LAFC or maybe Austin, but you never count out the teams from the Northwest, especially come this time. One of them can get hot, and it can just go off from there. And obviously, Seattle have all the talent coming off of winning the CONCACAF Champions League. So I think this is a fascinating watch for sure, and a game that's both teams, honestly, a draw would probably put both teams in a really, really bad spot that they don't want to be in. And whoever loses is obviously in a really bad spot as well. There needs to be a winner, and both teams need to make sure that it's them.
So definitely going to finish 1-1 then.
Yeah, I don't know. I hope not. I think Seattle's going for this, but we'll see.
Yeah. Look, if I had to pick the two, I would be leaning to Seattle, and I think you make a very interesting point about Rusnak, but equally so, this could very much cancel each other out and end up in a 0-0, 1-1 scenario, but more likely 1-1 with that both teams to score record of Portland.
Yeah, I think there are goals in this game for sure, especially if Rui Diaz plays.
There's goals in every MLS game.
Right, well, there's always goals, so it's just a question of how many, right? That's why we love the MLS. So let's get to a team, and you alluded to them earlier, a team that we're a little bit surprised at how high they are up in the standings. We're talking about Dallas. They are welcoming RSL. Dallas, actually, they're high up in the standings, and they just got waxed by Nashville last week, 4-0. but they were on fire before that. RSL has been going the complete wrong direction until last week as well, when they got a result. So this is kind of does the overall form hold or does the last game hold as the form? Dallas versus RSL. Dallas is going off as the home favorite at 1.95. RSL 3.63 as the underdog.
Yeah, well, as you alluded, Dallas did suffer a heavy defeat in Nashville last week, and as we've said time and time again, you have to expect this from a Dallas side that have youth throughout the lineup. They can come in and smash a team and perform completely differently the following week. But yeah, I was very surprised to see them sitting there in third place in the Western Conference. I knew that their form had improved, and I sort of expected them to see them, fourth, fifth, sixth, quietly confident in the playoff positions. But third is very impressive, particularly after that defeat. They one of the very few teams to go to Salt Lake and come away with 3 points a few weeks ago, as we also highlighted. Salt Lake on, like I say, bad run of form. I think it's one win in the last 5. That was last week. But for me, this is very close to the bet of the week for me in terms of Dallas at even money in the form that they've got playing at home. I fancy them to do the double over Salt Lake.
Yeah, I think that's right on the money. And actually, RSL's form is even worse than that. They've won 2 of the last 10, and they've only taken 10 points from the last 10, which is only more than Houston and DC United. Those are the only 2 teams that they have more points than in the last 10 games. And as you did say, Dallas lost last week and RSL won last week. I think had those results flipped and the form had kind of held, I think Dallas would be a much heavier favorite. But I feel like people are a little scared off by the 4-0 defeat. I wouldn't really worry about it. Dallas is really, really good at bouncing back from defeats. They have these random, weird one-off games that we've been attributing all year to youth and inexperience, and you just have these inconsistent moments. But they've only lost back-to-back games once this season, so I think they've done a really good job when they have suffered a defeat. Coming straight back, this is not an RSL team that I think is loaded with a ton of talent, and they're just kind of sliding down the standings. They're being sort of helped by the fact that nobody behind them is really making a push at them, but that could change at any time. Like Seattle and Portland play each other. Nashville's coming on now. The LA Galaxy is starting to kind of look like half a team. Vancouver's still there. Colorado is not even that far away. They're only, 6 points behind RSL. So there's just a lot of teams. I think they're going to have to put together some results to make the playoffs, and I don't know if I see that particularly happening this week.
Yeah, no, I think you're on the money there. Like Dallas are not a team where a defeat weighs particularly heavy on them, even a 4-0 one. They're on paper they're much stronger, much more in better form than Salt Lake. I'm not a fan of Salt Lake, and I think the defeat last week's done us a favor and given us more attractive odds. And I think, like I say, they were very close to me picking them as our bet of the week. So I'd certainly wouldn't. I'll certainly be siding with Dallas here.
And last thought on this game, from a Dallas perspective, the thing that's really carried them has been their defense. They've really not been able to score goals as much as you would think a third-place team could. But before that 4-0 defeat, they had only allowed 28 goals, which would put them third in the league. They're still fifth in the league as it stands right now on 32 goals allowed this season from 28 games. So that the back end has really, really been solid for Dallas. They just have to find a way to create more, which with that front three, plus Sebastian Lletget now, you would think that they would have some creativity. So it's going to be a tough out if they continue to play well defensively and they can nick a goal here or there. I think Dallas is a team that no one really wants to face come playoff time, and I don't know what their odds are to win the MLS Cup, but they've got a decent shot here kind of at making a run, kind of been an under-the-radar type of team. Yeah,
I agree. They're a tricky side. It's certainly a side that you wouldn't want to be facing when it comes cup time. So
yeah, absolutely. So we'll get into our fourth and final featured game of the weekend, and this is one that's going to hurt a little bit because I know you're about to go pretty hard on me. Atlanta versus DC United. DC has been in a terrible run of form. They haven't scored a goal in 5 games, 6 games, something like that.
At least 5.
Haven't even scored a goal. Like, how hard is that to do? good news is Christian Benteke potentially makes his debut. They've still got Taxi Fontes. They've brought in a ton of players. It just doesn't seem like they've gelled together yet. They go down to Atlanta as pretty heavy underdogs, 1.56 for Atlanta, 5.19 for DC United. I assume I know which way you're going in this one, but enlighten us all.
Well, for a team that hasn't scored in 5 games, signing the prolific Benteke should solve that. 3 goals a season as an average for like the last 10 years, I think.
But his hold-up play is great.
Yeah, holding up for who, though?
No one.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing, I don't want to go too hard on DC. Look, their form has been, terrible all season, and it's certainly... It's not easy to see from the stats the impact that Rooney's had since he's come in. They've averaged half a point per game over the last 10 games. That's creeps up to 0.67 points over the last 6. But they're firmly rooted to the bottom table. Lost 4 of the last 5. Not scored in 5. But I've watched a couple of their games recently, and at times they've not played as that badly. They've been, I forget who they were playing now, but they've been in the game for a couple of the games that I've seen until a goal goes in, and then it's sort of capitulation starts there. But there are signs that they're getting harder to beat. There are signs that they're trying for Rooney. Then that's something. So, but still, at the bottom, you can't escape the fact they're right at the bottom of the table. Terrible form, has been all season. They are the worst team in the league right now, and that's not going to change anytime soon.
No.
And Atlanta's probably one of the few places I wouldn't want to be going in a broader sense because of I know Atlanta are another team who have massively underperformed this year, but they are generally very strong at home. I think there was something like 4th or 5th best home record this season in the table in recent form. Sorry, not the whole season because they've been shocking. They are the 3rd best second half team. So outside of the 2 that we mentioned earlier, Austin and LA, they're actually 3rd best with 42 points this season. And when we're looking at the expected goals, this actually has the largest disparity between the 2 sides. Atlanta is expected to be 1.19 goals better than DC United. So, yeah, I mean, I can't see beyond an Atlanta win. But, and there is a big but, 1.48, 1.58, sorry, for Atlanta to win is very, very low, even against DC United. And I would struggle to get involved from that angle. I do think there are a couple of other ways to play this game. But before that, what do you think, Chris? Any defense of DC?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think the way to play this game is wait until the lineups come out. See if Ochoa is in goal for DC United, and if he is, you bet the under, because I don't think Atlanta's scoring more than 1, maybe 2 goals against Ochoa, and we know DC United couldn't score if there were no defense on the field. So I think you bet the under. I think it's like a 1-0, 1-1, maybe 2-0 Atlanta. I think it's under 2.5 in this for sure. Just to put a damper on your whole Atlanta United is good form thing. Atlanta United has won 4 of its last 21 MLS matches since they beat DC United in DC back on April the 2nd. Mm-hmm. They're 4-8-9. 4 wins, 8 draws, 9 losses. That's not good. That's really not good for a team with as much talent as they have. That's really, really bad. 4 wins in that time are tied with DC for the fewest in the MLS. Only Houston and DC have fewer points since April the 2nd of this year. But yeah, DC is bad. DC is really bad. Like, you have got to get 3 points at home against DC. I don't care who you are. Like, DC should not have any points this year, especially at this point with a basically a brand new roster and it all has to gel together. There's no way that DC should be anywhere near this game. But I mean, I guess we'll see how it goes. How would you play this game?
Yeah, look, I certainly would be running a mile from close to $1.50 for Atlanta to win. I guess your point around the unders is an interesting one. So, are you suggesting that DC won't score this weekend?
Probably not.
Because I mean,
there's a really good. Well, they could make a goal. Like, you never know. You never know. Benteke could get a knockdown or something. You know what I mean? Like, Taxi can always show up. Taxi scored 3 by himself against Orlando.
Yeah.
So
I guess my point is that's if you're assuming that Atlanta are going to win, and so you have to decide whether you think DC can score, because that'll be the difference between unders and overs, because it'll either be a 2-0 or a 2-1. But look, the way I would play this game is that Atlanta should win. They are very strong in the second half. DC United is the second worst team in the league in the second half, which is not necessarily that surprising or bold a stat.
Give me some hope at halftime when we're 0-0.
So, like, I like the draw halftime Atlanta to win at 4.75. I think that's quite attractive. Like I say, DC have been at least trying in the most recent games, and it's been taking a while for teams to break them down. And when they do, that's sort of when the floodgates have opened a little bit. So, yeah, I think a similar repeat of that, especially if Ochoa is in goal. The game's tight until Atlanta find the first goal. So, yeah, I think a DC draw, Atlanta win at nearly 4-1 is a good play for me on this one.
They have been trying until Saturday when they lost 6-0 to Philadelphia. Now, here are some fun stats about that game, because it was the second 6-0 loss. It was actually 7-0 against the Union in July. So we lost 13-0 to the Union over 2 games. And here are the fun stats about this. So from the DC perspective, DC has now lost by 6 goals 3 times in the last 30 MLS matches.
Ouch.
3 times in 30. For some perspective, none of DC's first 865 MLS matches were lost by 6 goals or more. So 3 in the last 30. They have not done it in the first 865 in club history. Now, from the Philadelphia perspective, and this was going to be my trivia question to you here at the beginning, but there's not really a way to ask this. So I'm just going to go ahead and flat out tell you. So, the Union's 6-0 win over DC United on Saturday was the 3rd win by at least 6 goals in club history. All right? 3rd win by 6 goals in club history for Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
That equals Sporting Kansas City for the most by a club in MLS history.
Wow.
All right? So 3 all-time is the MLS record for any club. All 3 of the Union's 6-goal wins have come in their last 9 matches. So in the last 9 matches, they have more 6-goal wins than any other team in MLS history.
Wow.
That is absurd.
That is absurd.
Yeah, I know. I don't have, like, how do you compete with Philadelphia at this point? They are just steamrolling everybody named DC United. They just look amazing.
Yeah, if they can play DC United every week, then they're certainly going to be MLS Cup champions. But it's interesting you bring that up, because I was going to bring up a little sequence that's involved in Philadelphia that I think is quite interesting. Because I know you've been talking about the Union, since we started the show, that they're going under the radar, they're not appreciated, they're looking dangerous, they're improving week by week, and they certainly are. But when I sat down to do the previews today, I was quite surprised. And let me read out this sequence of results for you. Won 6-0. Lost 1-0. Won 4-1. Lost 3-1. Won 6-0. So it's kind of like, when they roll, they really roll. But it's very interesting that they're following up all of these big victories with a defeat. And that must be setting some sort of alarm bells at Philly.
I don't think so.
Because are they flat track bullies, or are they the real deal?
No, they're the real deal, and I think.
Then why are they losing?
So I was thinking about this earlier. Right, they're running away with the Eastern Conference. They're 5 points ahead of both Montreal. 5 points ahead of Montreal, who I don't think is that great, and they're 6 points ahead of New York City FC, who I really don't think is that great without Tati Castellanos and Ronnie Dial.
But don't forget,
so they're running away with the East.
Both those teams have a game in hand as well, so it's not
okay. Fair enough. But they're still running away with the East. Like, it's not going to be close. Okay, so Philly's going to win the East.
Okay.
Philly's going to win the East, okay? So their loss was 1-0 to Dallas, okay? Not a bad loss away to Dallas. Like, Dallas is 3rd in the Western Conference, and we've said on their day they can beat anybody, okay? Now, 1 bad game at Cincinnati, and we've seen Cincinnati's front 3, okay? So granted, 1 bad game there. Other than that, they've been steamrolling people. since the DC United game, I'm going to go back further because you cut it off at the right spot. Since the DC United game, 7-0 to DC or to Philly over DC, 2-1 over Miami, 2-1 over New England, 1-0 over Orlando, 6-0 over Houston. Lost that Cincinnati game 3-1, 4-1 over a hot Chicago team, 1-0 defeat to Dallas, and a 6-0 over DC United. That's a really good string of results. Granted, against all playoff line type teams, but there's no real challenger in the Eastern Conference at this point who's going to make a real push, I think, to Philadelphia, because I think they're just they're absurd, scoring goals and defensively.
I'm going to disagree, and I'm also if we're in the process of selective stats, let's go back prior to that 7-0 win over DC.
We're just going to look at their whole schedule.
Basically, yeah. But they had one win in the previous 5 before that. So what I'm saying is when Philly run hot, they run
because
really
they couldn't
hot.
Score goals. Because they couldn't score goals. Now they're scoring.
No, they scored in all but one of those games, but they couldn't win. So I guess my point is this.
It was 0-0 to Columbus.
3 of the 5,
One.
sorry. 3 of the 5.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on, no. 4 of the 5. They scored in 4 of the 5 games that you're saying they couldn't score in.
Well, they only scored 1 in a lot of those games.
Yeah, but they scored. All right.
The point is they're scoring now. The point is they're scoring now.
But they're still win, lose, win, lose, win, lose. There's no point smashing one team when they're not turning up the next week and then smashing another team and not turning up the next week. So I'm just saying that I would be concerned with that lack of consistency. They're hot or they're not.
They've won 7 of the last 9 games. Is that right?
Depends how
Am I
you
counting that?
Stats, but yeah, you can count that.
7 of the last 9, and that's not consistent.
5, 6. But like I said,
and they've got Colorado and Atlanta coming into town, and they're gonna cream both of those teams too.
Hang on, let me see. We got how many games left of the season? 1, 2. They've got 5 games to play, right? And Montreal and New York have 6 games to play.
They've got 7 games to play.
Oh, sorry, show 5 more.
2 in October.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 for them and 8 for New York and Montreal. All right, side bet. Union.
You're not going to do this. You're not going to do this.
Union will not win the Eastern Conference.
Yes. Yes. I'm so glad you went there. I will take that all day long. Thank you so much.
All right.
What are we betting?
$10 to your chosen charity.
Perfect. I'll take that. And my favorite charity thanks you. We really do.
Happy to contribute.
Oh, I love that, man. I don't think so. I guess we can talk about New York City next, and we can kind of go through the games more in order after that.
Yeah.
But New York City, in my opinion, since they lost Tati Castellanos and specifically Ronnie Dyla, really, in my opinion, but since they lost Tati Castellanos specifically, really not been very good. They're just. I don't think this is it. I don't think this is the team.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to disagree with you. They certainly have gone down a level from where they were before. And that's why I'm only betting $10 for your charity. But because they're the most likely team to catch them. But, yeah, look, I think it's actually more than that. I think Ronnie Dahlia leaves, drop off in form. Find a little bit of form, Castellanos leaves. Then they lose Collins, their best centre-half, basically for the season, as far as I can tell, with an MCL. So there are definitely problems there, and they did lose 3 in a row. And for a team that's got the highest clean sheets this season, 13, they still have the highest clean sheets this season.
3 goals in those 3
They've
games.
given up 3 goals how many times in the last few games? I know, because most of their team's been
3 and 3.
Yeah,
the last three games they've given up 3 goals every time.
Yeah, they kept 3 clean sheets prior to that, 1 clean sheet away at Chicago. So, yeah, they seem to have this little slump. So, there you go. Dahlia leaves, and they went 4 games without winning. Then they won 4. Then Castellanos leaves and Callens get injured, and they lose 3 and draw 1. And then last week they sort of rebalanced. So
that's a big win against Chicago.
Yeah. And look, I still think New York have a huge amount of quality, and they are still the second or third best league, the best team in the league. LA are clearly top, and whether it's Philly or New York is open to debate. But I think maybe
Philly or Austin.
Yeah, sorry, Philly or Austin.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean. So you kind of look at this as being they're on the decline, or it's just they're having an adaptation period. So whenever they face a challenge, it's taking them a few games to figure it out, and then they move forward. So that depends on what you read into that Toronto result. Is that them figuring it out, and then they're going to go on another sequence of games potentially? And I do think that game in hand is crucial against Philly because win that, and I do think Philly might drop points this weekend. Suddenly, you could be looking at 2 points between them.
Philly are dropping points to one of the worst road teams in the league.
Yeah, we'll come on to that later. But potentially.
Oh my God.
A potential. But anyway, yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, so look.
Your good news is the game in hand is against DC United next week.
Right? So you may as well
probably
just
win
add.
that one.
So you may as well just put the 3 points on the board, right? So let's just call it 2 points.
I will say it's at Red Bull Arena, so it's not at Yankee Stadium, which is good for us. Because at Yankee Stadium, it could be anywhere.
It could be on the moon. They could do water polo and it's still going to be NYC.
Yeah, no, it's not going to go well. So New York City, they're at Orlando this week. I guess we should actually say what match we're doing.
Yes.
At Orlando this week. I don't love their chances because I do think Orlando's decent. I also think Orlando can just kind of have games where they're just horrific. So I don't love Orlando. I don't love New York City in this game. I don't really know which way to go on that one. Do you have any other thoughts on that game?
Yeah, I think Orlando is the type of team that will suit New York. Orlando's form is they lost 3 in a row, but they did win the last 2. I'll give them that. But the fact that Orlando all season can't score goals at any regular ratio. Their average goals per match is 1.15 goals per match, which is very low. And
they scored 3 in a loss to DC United too.
Yeah, and they're 4th worst in the second half with just 6 wins, and against New York, who are the 4th best with 10 wins. Where are we looking? Yeah, look, New York still, like I said, I think New York are just adapting to challenges this year. I think they're having periods where there's big disruption, they lose a little pace, and then they readapt. I think that win last week was crucial. I think there's a couple of very, very interesting opportunities here. I wouldn't be backing New York on outright, but I would be backing them to. Well, actually, no. I rephrase that. New York to win at 3s is very attractive for me, 2-1 against a team that struggles to score. But more interestingly for me, it would be New York to win to 0 at 6s or 5-1. If you believe New York are going to win this game, they're likely to keep a clean sheet despite that recent record of conceding goals because Orlando don't score. So if New York can control this game, similar performance to last week in Toronto, win 1-0, win 2-0, that 5-1 could look very short come the end of the weekend. So
if you look at this from Orlando's perspective, they have New York City coming into town this week. They have Seattle, who'll be desperate next week coming to town, and then they play the U.S. Open Cup final against the USL team, and they cannot lose that game. Mm-hmm. They might even have to rotate in Seattle to make sure they win the Open Cup. And realistically, you're looking at the standings. Then they go to Philadelphia. Then they have Atlanta, Toronto come in. They go to New York, and that's New York City, to Miami, and then home against Columbus. None of those are easy games. They are like on the playoff line. They need every single point possible. NYCFC just doesn't have the same drive. Like they're 11 points clear of the line. They're probably going to get in either way.
They're in already.
I just don't. They're pretty much in. They're pretty much in. But that's my point. They just don't have the same hunger or the same need to win, I guess, as Orlando does.
Need, yes. Hunger, no. I think if you look at the culture of the CFG, this is a team that wants to win. They won the Cup last year, which they thought was a year or 2 early, but this year they certainly want to prove that they are more than Castellanos, and they certainly want to prove that they're a team of winners. I think they are, but will be highly motivated to try and chase down Union at this point and take the Eastern Conference. As I say, if you add those 3 points onto that board, they are 1 win and 1 defeat for Union away from regaining that. So I think they're motivated enough. And don't forget, they will also want to get their form straight going into the Cup. So going into the MLS Cup, you mean the playoffs? Yeah.
Well, it's easier said than done. You don't have Tati Castellanos on the field anymore. I don't know. I mean, there's still talent all over the field.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say there's no talent. Tati was such a big part of that team.
100%.
So let's.
But one thing I would take encouragement for, Talis Magna looked very good last week. I think he is a little while.
Really good.
His potential's off the charts, but I think
he's really good now.
Yeah, but he hasn't stepped up and replaced. Well, not necessarily replaced because it's a different player, but he looked dangerous last week, and I could see him getting on the score sheet this week. So, yeah, like I said, I think
keep an eye on it.
It's a team that's going to adapt, and I like New York here, and I think you can get some really big odds if you think they're gonna how you think they're gonna win the game, and that's for the clean sheet.
So let's go rapid fire here for these next few games to try to get through some of Minnesota United, Houston Dynamo. 1.75 for Minnesota, 4.14 for Houston Dynamo. Any thoughts on this one?
Well, it feels really counterintuitive to me to say back Minnesota at odds on, but it is back Minnesota at odds on. Houston were terrible, and they've just fallen off a cliff in the last month or two. Lost 4 of the last 5, 7 of the last 10. Only Kansas and Charlotte have lost more games this season than them at 14. Minnesota have won 3 of the last 5. They're averaging 2.17 points per game in the last 6. They're 4th in the form table for the last 10 with 2.3 points.
Yeah.
I always struggle with Minnesota odds on, but yeah, Minnesota odds on looks the way.
Minnesota's so, I don't know, they're so underrated, I guess, in my opinion. And they can score. Like, they can score goals, and they can sometimes play some defense. I don't think this is one to overthink. I think this is just Minnesota, easy, lay it down and don't worry about it. Next one, New York Red Bulls and Inter Miami, 1.66 for the Red Bulls at home, 4.67 for Inter Miami on the road.
Yeah, before delving a bit deeper into this game, I would have just marked NYRB on this one because I know Inter Miami generally aren't that good away from home. But when you actually dig deeper into the stats, Inter Miami are pretty hot over the last 10. I think they're 3rd in the form table. They've won the last 2. I think that's the last 2 away or at home. I've written that down wrong, but they're unbeaten in 5. Red Bulls got 1 win in 6. Maybe their legs are getting a bit tired, and the youth is starting to show through. I think the draw looks quite big at this. It falls to 3-1, but it'd be hard to pull. Inter Miami have not over the whole season not had a great away record, but they're certainly a team that seems to be doing more right than wrong recently. And Higuain is hot at the moment.
You want to know why? They traded for Alejandro Pozuelo, who was a perfect piece in that system.
Correct, and you did call that.
He did not work in Toronto at all. Bob Bradley didn't want to play with a 10. He's a 10. That's it. He can't play an 8. He can't play further back. He doesn't track back on defense. He's a perfect 10. And since they had him, they have been scoring goals left and right. Higuain is benefiting massively, as you said. And this team is white hot. They just beat a white hot Toronto team 2-1 in the last game. They took out New York City before that. They got a draw with Montreal before that. Montreal also white hot. So, yeah, this is a Red Bull team that is not hot versus a Miami team that is white hot, and a Miami team that is really pushing for the playoffs. I don't know. Red Bulls are starting to fall down the table a little bit. I'm starting to get semi-concerned that they may not, sneak into the playoffs here. Yep. They may back their way in, but Miami is coming. Columbus is coming. Cincy's coming. New England's coming. Like, there are some hot teams in the Eastern Conference, and they're only like 5 points clear of those teams, 5 to 6 points clear. So I actually like the big underdog here. I like Miami. 4.6 is a big number for a team that's that hot. I would probably try to get it somewhere in like the 2 range, like maybe Miami -1, or +1, I guess, something like that. But yeah, I do like that game a lot. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that one?
No, I mean, look, I don't disagree with you there. If you want to root for a team, root for Miami. They're the value. If you want to play it safe, try and build the draw into it as well. Yeah. But there's no value in getting behind the Red Bulls right now.
Not at all. So next one, Charlotte at home hosting Toronto. We mentioned how hot Toronto is. 2.31 for Charlotte, 2.79 for Toronto. Massive game for both of these two teams, as they are both basically one loss shy of knocking themselves out of the playoffs. If Toronto lose, they're probably out. If Charlotte lose, they could maybe back their way in, but I also don't think they have that much talent. Where do we go on this one?
I think the biggest concern for Charlotte here is the fact they've lost the last two at home. Their home record is basically what's maintained them all season. And I think I called it a few weeks ago when we did the pod that I was expecting to see a bit of a regression there in their home form. I think they could be very proud of their first season in MLS, but I do see a dip.
Oh, for sure.
And I think they're going to come up short by the end of the season. With that in mind, I would side with Toronto as being the side more likely to try and get something out of this, or not trying, but more likely to get something out of this game. But Charlotte did beat NYC last week, so you can't rule them out.
That's how bad NYC are.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't have a strong opinion either way. The two teams might cancel themselves out. Charlotte will be determined not to lose 3 in a row at home for the first time this season. So let's see. But not one to get involved with too heavily.
I have a strong opinion on this game. I am backing Toronto for sure. I think they go on the road with just way more talent than Charlotte has. I get Charlotte at home has been very, very good. But Toronto, since Insigne, Bernardeschi, Prosciutto, those guys have gotten in there, they've steamrolled people except for the Canadian final, which they lost at Vancouver in a penalty shootout. And they lost like last week, I believe, which from what I heard, it looked like they had tired legs because they played 5 matches in 2 weeks. And they don't have any subs. So they've got a week off. I think they'll be back to normal Toronto, and I think they'll win by 2+ goals pretty easily. So we'll take Toronto there. The hell is real rivalry, Cincinnati against Columbus. This is a great game to go watch if you ever get a chance. Both these stadiums are gorgeous. Cincinnati 2.12 at home. Columbus comes in 3.12 on the road. Do you have a read either way on this one?
Well, the way I play this game, it all comes down to whether you're a person that backs trends or ones who like to be contrarian a little bit and go against trends, because the trends here all points to a draw. Cincinnati have had 4 draws in the last 5, Columbus 3 in the last 5. Cincinnati have 10 draws all season. Columbus have 11 draws all season, the most of any side. Basically, these two are the draw specialists. So you either bet into that trend or you think this one won't because of how many draws there has been. But for me, 3.75 on the draw looks a pretty decent play.
That's interesting, because Columbus I could see being a big draw team because they didn't score a ton of goals in the beginning of the season, and that's typically how you get draws in the MLS. Cincinnati, though, doesn't make any sense. They score goals for fun.
Yeah,
so
ever since Acosta's red card, they've been on a draw heater.
Interesting.
So
that's weird.
They drew most of the games when he was out on that 3-game suspension, and they've continued that on since then. Basically,
that tells me maybe Cincinnati in this game, but I don't want to bet against Columbus. Columbus, I think, is one of the more complete teams in the MLS, so I really, really don't want to bet against Columbus, especially as that big of an underdog. I think I just stay away from this game. Both of these teams, I think, are very good, though, so I'd be interested to watch this game for sure. We talked Union and Colorado, Chicago against Montreal, 2 teams. Coming in, Chicago 2.3, Montreal 2.92. Montreal obviously selling Georgi Mihailovic, but big news is he will stay through the end of the season. So that is
that right?
helpful
I was
for
going to ask
them.
you about that. Okay.
Yeah, he is staying through the end of the season. He'll be transferred on January the 1st. Montreal is the slight underdog in this game. How do you think this one plays?
Well, considering our charity bet, I think I have to go with Montreal here because they're my other hope of pulling the Union back. But Montreal actually, I thought they were going to start to drift like Red Bulls have. And they did have a bit of a shaky period, but they also seem to have found a little bit of form again in their most recent matches. Unbeaten in the last 5, winning the last 3. And they're still pretty prolific. And I think keeping Geordie is going to be key to that. I think they're hungry to keep going into the season, and they're a team that doesn't necessarily know when they're beat. So, whatever you score, we'll try and score more kind of team.
Mm-hmm.
With that in mind, over 2-1 at 3.15, I think Montreal look quite big. But I'm not hugely strong on this, but I would have to pick Montreal at the moment.
I think Montreal's probably the better team. The question for me is, how much do Chicago care? Do they still think they're in this thing? Because they're 30 points. They're now 5 points adrift. It's now or never. They've got to get a result from this game if they're going to get back into this thing. They had a little bit of a run where they looked like maybe they could get back into it. Shaqiri's a good player. I just don't know that they have the talent around them to really challenge and be successful. That being said, Montreal's had some weird results this year, so
For sure.
this could go anywhere. I just stay away from all Montreal games if I can humanly possibly help it. But yeah, I guess the home team at 2.3 is not horrible, but I just stay away.
Chicago for me are Toronto minus Insigne and Bernardeschi. Like they're two big. That's what the impact.
Minus the two world class players on the team. Yeah,
no, but I mean this
makes a big difference.
No, of course it does. No, but what I mean is like Toronto and Chicago were pretty evenly matched form-wise until those boys came in. And I think my point to you is I don't think Chicago are going to do much for the rest of the season because they are one or two quality players away from being anything worthwhile monitoring.
Yeah.
That's my point.
I think so.
Sarky little.
Sporting Kansas City against the San Jose Earthquakes. Sporting Kansas City all of a sudden on a tear. They have been very, very good lately, and they've got their brand new striker who has kicked out Kiri Shelton, my super rare card. Agato, I think his name is, and he's been actually somewhat decent. I don't think Kiri Shelton scored all year this year, so not exactly a hard decision there for Peter Verbees. Anyway,
you could probably
Sporting Kansas City
partner with Benteke.
Oh dear God, I hope we don't.
Shelton and Benteke.
God, we never score a goal all year. Sporting Kansas City 1.86. San Jose comes on the road after beating LAFC 3.74. Big underdogs on the road. What do you think here?
I fancy Kansas. Maybe not quite odds on, but I'm not going to read too much into San Jose's victory last week. I called it because I didn't like the LA team. It's a derby game. I think they raised their game because of the opponents. But prior to that game, they were terrible, and I think they'll go back to being fairly terrible now. I don't think they're that motivated to the end of the season. Kansas have found, like you said, as you indicated, the ability to score goals, which is one of the things that were missing for them. Well, actually, scoring and conceding was an issue for them most of the season. But they've won 4-1 and 4-2 and lost 3-4 in the last three games. I think they are going to try and push to make sure they don't finish bottom of the table this year. I want slightly better odds on Kansas, but I do think Kansas will win here.
Yeah, I kind of want to go Kansas City too. I like San Jose. Don't get me wrong. Like I think they have some talent, and I can't wait to see them get. I forget his name. But you're getting one of the U.S. national team assistant coaches next year. I can't wait to see them next year. I think they'll probably be a preseason MLS Cup bet for me because I think they'll be like 80, 100 to 1, and I think they could make the playoffs. Like they've got some good players. I don't think this is the year though for it, and I think Kansas City are, they've got some professional pride. Peter Vermees is a great coach; he'll have them ready to play. So I think we will see Kansas City get another result here. So good for them.
I think San Jose. The roadmap for San Jose is Cincinnati. I would have made them I would have profiled them pretty similar last year, and I think Cincinnati has shown to San Jose what can be done if they get a few pieces right and the tactics are right. So. It may be right. San Jose may be a better team to keep an eye on next year.
Yeah, I think Jamiro Montero plays the Luciano Acosta role pretty well. They've got a Bobasi, they've got Cade Cowell. It's like they've got the pieces to kind of do what Cincinnati has done. The difference is they haven't had the Celentano defender, and and Wobo, I think his name is, the central defensive midfielder. They have Jackson Ewell, which, I mean, yes, former U.S. national team player, but like, I don't know that he's really the answer there. So I would be interested to see what they do in the offseason. I'll be very interested to see what kind of system they play because a lot of it has been system related, their issues. So that'll be interesting to see next year. Next game, Vancouver against Nashville. BC plays the toughest place to play in North America. 2.68 for the home team, 2.55 for Nashville. Nashville coming off a thrashing of Dallas. How do you think this game goes?
Yes, there's a few interesting stats here. So Vancouver, they've only had one defeat in the last 5, and that was against LA. They're 2 points behind Nashville, so they'll certainly be seeing the playoffs within reach. They are the third worst first half team with just 5 wins in the first half this season. But what makes this really interesting is Nashville are the worst performing second half team in the league with 4 wins and 14 losses in the second half.
Wow.
But they're the second best performing first half team in the league with 12 wins in the first half. So Nashville either come out and kill you in the first half, or if you can get to halftime and still be in it, that's where they're dropping points. So I think it's a very hard game to call pre-match. but I would certainly take a very close interest in what happens in the first half, because that would likely dictate how this game goes in the second half.
BC Place is the toughest place to play in North America. I like Vancouver at home.
Is that our catchphrase? Because you say it every week.
That's my catchphrase, at least. At least every week they're at home, I say that. No, like I love the Julian Gressel addition. He's one of our players that we followed very, very closely. He fits that system perfectly. And I like what Vancouver's doing. Like, they were one of my favorites pre-season. They had a really bad start to the season, like horrifically bad first 5-10 games. And they have gotten right back. They're literally on the playoff line. The problem is they have played 2 more games than the LA Galaxy to get to that playoff line. So it doesn't. They're still not odds on. But if they can win this game, it goes a long, long way to getting them back into that conversation. So it's a massive game for both these two teams. And then Atlanta DC United, we talked about Orlando City against New York City. We talked about the New England Revolution against the LA Galaxy. Looks like the last game of the slate. What do you think about this game? New England's 2.02, LA going on the road 3.3. Massive game for both these two teams, although they're not chasing each other. They are still chasing points in general.
Yeah, I mean, agreed, huge game. I know LA on paper showing some signs of life in recent weeks, and I've been pretty down on them, but I still am, to be fair. I think they were flattered by the result against Seattle last week. I forget who they played recently, but I don't like this Galaxy team, and I would just have to side with New England. I think they had a big loss in Montreal last week, but their form's been solid, if not spectacular, prior to that. Interestingly, the away side has won the last 2 in this fixture, but I would have New England to edge this at the moment because I just don't like Galaxy right now.
New England they were on an absolute tear of clean sheets, and I think that's been the big difference. Petrovic has been great in goal for them. They finally look halfway decent. Now they just got to score some goals. I think they only scored 5 goals in the last 6 games, if I'm reading that correctly. So they're just not scoring enough. Bo has been out. I don't know if he's back or not. I honestly have not checked. I don't like the Galaxy. I do like the signing of Riqui Puig, I think is how you say his name, from Barcelona. Do like that signing. Yeah. So I do like that for the future. I don't know if he's acclimated to the team yet, though. I don't know that he'll start. So at home, New England needs points. Cruz Arena against this old team. Yeah, let's try it. Let's go New England here, I think, in this one.
Sounds good.
We can just quickly touch on maybe 1 or 2 Premier League games if you want to. Do you have any games that stand out to you?
Yeah, like I said, I think we've obviously got a full program this weekend, a full program midweek. So I think we can get a lot deeper into the MLS, and we may actually split the show a little bit to make it easier for listeners, those who are more interested in EPL next week. But there's a couple of games I thought it was worth just very quickly touching on that have some potential interest in the markets. But before we get into that, it's my turn for the quiz question.
Oh, God.
So, Kris, what plugs do they use in the UK?
I don't know, some really weird ones, though, that don't work with our American plugs.
The best plugs in the world.
The best plugs in the world. No one told me that there are different, my parents have been to Europe, my sister's been to Europe, they all knew I was going to Europe. No one said, hey, maybe get an adapter for all of your devices to work. That's why we didn't have a show a couple of weeks ago. So, so that was, I guess, my bad, but I'm going to blame that on family and friends completely not telling me what to do. But yeah, it was it was horrible.
Yeah, well, I bring it up only partly to embarrass you because it was hilariously funny, but I also bring it up because that is the reason we didn't have a pod that week, and that is the reason that I wasn't able to quote to our listeners my hot tip on the relegation market being Leicester at 19-1. Which has now come into a much lower 9-2. I think Leicester, the only side not to make a signing over the summer. I'd profiled them to definitely underperform much lower than expectation this year. So there's probably not much value in it, but I just wanted to highlight that and embarrass you a little bit at the same time. But looking at the games this week, I think there's a very fascinating contest contest with Brighton and Leeds. What's your thoughts on this game?
So obviously Leeds is the United States' team now. Like, they've literally put Leeds on TV here in the US and bumped like Liverpool and Man United and like all these big teams. American coach, American number 10, American number 6. Like, it's definitely our team, and I hope they do really well. Like, I know how good Brendan Aronson is. I think he's maybe my favorite player on the U.S. national team. And it's not he's not a traditional like number 10 type of guy. He's a very Leeds number 10, like a very press, like he just runs for 90 minutes. And I don't know, like it's above hard work. Like, it's like hard work is like you're just running. He's sprinting at people for 90 minutes. Like, it's not just hard work. It's like elite hard work. And you saw it with the goalkeeper mistake from Chelsea, and that set the tone for the whole game. They obliterated Chelsea. Brighton's tough, though. Like, Brighton is not to be underestimated or trifled with. They finished 9th last year. It's tough. I don't think they're going on the road to win. I think this is more of a toss-up game, though, than the odds might lead you to believe. So at 4-1, I don't mind backing Leeds, but I still think Brighton probably sneak the win here. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. What do you think?
Look, I agree with everything you said there. I did watch the Leeds Chelsea match last week, and they were very impressive. And it looked like a Jesse Marsch team. It looked like and none of this is any negative to Bielsa. I mean, it's amazing, but I think the team needed to evolve and create its new identity. And I think with the addition of Tyler Adams and Brendan Aronson, and I think the tactics are starting to play towards Marsch's style. I think they were very, very impressive, and I think Leeds fans can be hopeful of a good season ahead. I agree. Brighton have got the same record as Leeds so far this season. Obviously, they won at United in the opening game of the season. They picked up another win and draw since then. Going to Brighton is no easy measure for sure. I think the only thing that holds Brighton back is their lack of clinical finishing, but I think they're in for another solid mid-table season. I'll be very interested to see how this game goes. I just think Leeds are a little long at 4.1, I think they'll be hot off the back of that Chelsea result, and I can see them going there and getting a win. But this is small stakes. It's very early in the season; anything can happen. But yeah, I was very impressed with Leeds.
Brighton also with a good win against West Ham, if I remember correctly.
I feel like Brighton's
well, easy there. No, I feel like Brighton's schedule early in the season has been better than Leeds, but yeah, I don't know. That Chelsea result was a massive one. But even Jesse Marsch this week was like, "Hey guys, like we're not just going to beat Chelsea every week. Like that was a great result, but like let's continue to work here."
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I don't think he wants expectations as high as they are right now. Any other games that you want to hit from the Premier League here?
Yeah, look, I think very quickly, I think with Chelsea, Leicester is quite interesting, but I think Chelsea are more likely to rebound from that defeat to Leeds than Leicester are, for the reasons I mentioned earlier in the show.
The Wesley Fofana derby.
Yeah, the Wesley Fofana derby, indeed. I quite like Chelsea to win by 2 in this one at 2.2. I think if Chelsea are going to win, I think they'll win by a couple. So I think that's much better than the match odds, which are around 1.4. Southampton Man United is going to be an interesting one, particularly after that result in midweek. Any thoughts from you, Kris?
Oh yeah, I don't get this at all. Southampton at 4.3. Are you kidding me? I'm taking Man United all day. 1.77 for a team that is way more talented and just came off the back of leading Liverpool. I get it. They lost the first 2 games. Fine. They just beat Liverpool. They're coming against Southampton, for God's sake. They're going to win this game.
Okay, I'm not saying they're not going to win this game, but I certainly would not be backing Man United at $1.70 away from home. One, what do they say? One swallow does not make a summer. And Liverpool Man United is a fierce derby. San Jose can beat LA. Could be the same scenario here. There's a lot more wrong still with Man United than is right. And
there's a lot wrong with Southampton too.
There is, but I think they've taken points off Man United in 3 of the last 5 times that they've played at St. Mary's.
2 draws last season, 1-1.
Yeah, so yeah, I think Man United is too short in this game for me, and I would want to see a lot more consistency from them before you get behind them. So Yeah, I think I'd be taking Southampton on the handicaps, maybe.
So you're backing like a Southampton win or draw. You don't like Southampton to win, but
I don't like Man United to win. None of those prices, basically.
Okay. I think that's more fair, but I still think Man United are going to win this game. Any other thoughts or anything here before we wrap things up for this week? Obviously, we'll have a full Premier League, recap next week, but just a couple little taste preview for you.
I just loved your face when you saw the price of Bournemouth at Liverpool. I wish we could have captured that one on camera. coming from the
MLS. Oh my God. It's like 5-1 is like the craziest underdog you've ever seen. And Bournemouth is going off at 25-1. And I was like, oh my gosh, are you serious?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the EPL for you. It's not quite as balanced as old MLS, is it?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think with this game, Liverpool are very short. I think 1.1. I mean, rightly so, even though they haven't won a game this season. They're sure to click into gear sooner or later. But I think Bournemouth with a 2.5 goal head start at even money is not the worst. Or if you're really pro Liverpool to win with a clean sheet, or about 1.75 could be interesting. But again, all of these matches are tread carefully, small stakes. We're still only 3 or 4 games into the season, so
honestly, I might take both of those, like Liverpool to win on a clean sheet and Bournemouth to lose by less, because like 2-0 Liverpool, you get both of them.
Perfect result. Yeah.
And if you, I mean, there's very few results that lose both of them. So
Correct.
I actually don't mind playing those two against each other.
Yeah, I think that's a good link market. You can win both, or you can win one or the other. There's very few that will lose both. So yeah, I agree.
And then it'll end 5-1 Liverpool. But yeah. Any other thoughts here before we wrap things up?
No, I think we're good for this week. Looking forward to getting back into the MLS action, and definitely looking forward to being more EPL focused next week.
Should be a lot of fun. And if you did enjoy the episode, make sure you leave us a review on whatever service you are listening to this to. You can check us out on YouTube as well. We'll have a lot of videos coming out over the next few weeks, having like smaller chunks, I guess. If you don't want to go the whole podcast at one time, we'll kind of release smaller chunks for you guys to take a look at, maybe 1 game, 2 games at a time. So really appreciate it for this week. We will see you all next week.